Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. This week's video is a review of Lost Records Bloomin' Rage Tape 2 and my full review of the game. If you missed it, 2 weeks ago I did a review of Tape 1 and Tape 2 released a few days ago, and I played through it again because it deleted my entire save file, so I was going to play through it again anyway, but kind of forced me to. But we're going to be going over the story beat by beat, and then wrap things up with my full review, my thoughts on the ending. But before we get started, only a small percentage of people are actually subscribed to my YouTube channel. Please do. We're almost to 5,000 subscribers, and I can't believe I've been doing this for the better part of a year now, and I'm close to having that many people following me. It's truly incredible, and I'm very, very thankful. My thoughts about the mechanics of the game as well as the dialogue have stayed exactly the same. I think the dialogue system is interesting, if not a little clunky, because waiting to see if more dialogue options pop up, things like that. And it's also difficult to tell when an important choice is coming versus just a regular dialogue choice. Life is Strange did a great thing where during these big choice moments, it would pause the whole game and say, hey, here's the big moment. Whereas I feel like in this game, every little thing is important. That's a great thing, but at the same time, it's like I don't really know, I don't even realize that getting the wrong toothbrush is going to cause somebody to go, completely off the deep end. You know what I mean? That's a little bit of an exaggeration. Well, not really, but we'll see. And the other issue I had with it was a more technical side of things. The fact that the game would crash quite often and would revert my save progress quite often was really, really annoying and just frustrating. So going in, I was very, very excited. I had many different theories about what could be in the box, where the box was from. Once again, the music, the acting, well, chef's kiss, that's the best part of the game. The best part of the game are these performances. Every actress did an amazing job, but I have to hand it to the actress who plays Kat, because they do a fantastic job. By far the best performance. It's incredible. So we open in Swan's room after the concert, and depending on who you're closest to, there's going to be different knickknacks, things like that, based on which character you're closest to. So for me, there was a lot of drawings of Kat, a lot of things related to her, and I also like the ability to call the other girls with the sort of looming limiter that is your mom. So she's listening to the phone line, and you can only really get through to the first two people you call, so that third person gets left out. We then go to the bar where Swan is being forced to clean everything up by her mom, and she has to go in and hand an apology to the owner of the bar, things like that. And we actually get to meet a younger version of Pam here. And it's very interesting. I like seeing her, but it did feel a little shoehorned in. When Pam first showed up, I thought she was going to have some supernatural background to her. However, she just ended up being a very low-key kind of character. After you clean up and optionally return a book to Pam, you try to go in to apologize, where Dylan comes out and basically yells at you, but it also opens an opportunity to interview Dylan. This interview is very interesting because I feel it really humanizes her. For the better part of the first half, we've only seen her as just Corey's annoying girlfriend. And while Corey is clearly taking advantage of the situation, we still don't really like Dylan at first, especially if you're close to Kat, who really doesn't like her sister at all. However, this interview really humanizes her. It helps us to understand where she's coming from, things like that. And I think it's very, very well done. I really like this scene. However, with the ending I ended up getting, and we'll get into that, it doesn't feel like it went anywhere. And I promise we will get into all the different endings and things like that at the end. Then we return back to the present day where we get one of our first big reveals. You start to peel back the newspaper, and it's revealed that the box is from Kat. It has the rusted old lock from Fawn's Rest, keeping the box shut. So this causes Noer to become stressed out and leave for a smoke, and this leaves you alone with Autumn once again. This opens up an interesting conversation with Autumn about how she feels left out and how she sort of always felt like the odd one out when they were kids. whether this is because of the blood pact or things like that where she didn't want to go along with it because she's very practical, or other things, it's interesting. And I think for my playthrough, where she certainly wasn't the one I had the highest affinity for at the end when it shows you their relationships. However, I still would go along with her and try to do things that made her happy, things like that. I wasn't out there trying to disagree with her. The only issue is that with Kat, a lot of her stuff going her route, whether it is the magic side of things, whether it's believing in the supernatural stuff, it really tends to contrast Nora, who is a much more serious and grounded person. And so by simply trying to get close to Kat, you end up bringing down yours and Autumn's relationship a lot. And that's why Autumn to me isn't exactly a fun character. That's not to say she's poorly written or anything. She's very realistic, but I mean that she lacks a lot of whimsy or any impracticality. To get close to Autumn, you have to be fairly serious throughout the game. And that to me just doesn't fall in line with the arc that I think that Swan would go on. And once again, we'll circle back to this. This is mainly just about. But I will also say that these sort of one-on-one conversations, these quiet moments, are very, very well done. The moments with the adult versions of the girls where you're one-on-one with them, or even when Nora first shows up, are so well done and so well written and engaging, especially when you consider that this is all first person. You don't get to see Swan at all during these sections, so you're just talking to these girls, and it's really a testament to how well detailed the environments are, as well as the writing, that it keeps me fully engaged. This also segments into a flashback with Autumn, where Swan is returning to Fawn's Rest to go get a thermos that belonged to her dad, and runs into Autumn, who is sort of going through a bit of a really bad time because of everything that's gone on. She feels guilty, she feels betrayed because Kat never told her. And she also just feels left out. And basically she's saying that she's gonna leave. If you try to get her to stay, she doesn't like that, but if you agree and say that, I guess I'll help you out with cleaning up and things like that, she'll actually sort of appreciate that. Then you can get her items for her. Now this part, in the moment, I was a little annoyed because the way it works is that she says, oh, my toothbrush is over there, and then you go over and there's 4 different toothbrushes to choose from, and you have to pick the right one. And the same goes for her magazine. And if you get these wrong, it really negatively impacts your relationship with her in the future as well as the past. And the other annoying thing is, after replaying it, it seems like these choices, if you get them right, doesn't really affect anything, even if you get it all correct. But in other playthroughs, I've seen these choices be the make or break, depending on what ending you get. So maybe I made some bad choices in tape 1 that I don't even know about. When a full guide comes out, I will absolutely take a look at it. And that to me just feels odd. That scene is so important to the narrative when really it isn't. Like, I get the point they're trying to say. They're trying to say that she feels left out and that you don't pay attention to her, but with it to have that much impact, I don't know. And then not only for that, for it to have no impact on my playthrough is also really confusing. But then afterwards, Autumn has a panic attack, and we get the option to help her. If you fail, she'll be somewhat absent from the story going forward, but if you succeed in helping her, and this is one of the neat things with the sort of 2 different timelines story, is that you can teach her a word game that in the future helps her calm down in the past, and it kind of comes full circle, and it's really the sweet moment. But also with getting her items, I will just read what I said in the moment. I was taking notes throughout my playthrough. I'm sorry, it's not my fault that Autumn is being super vague about the things she needs, because each thing I grab I feel like is the wrong one, and it's starting to get on my nerves. But I feel like I did a good job of trying to balance the relationship with the 3 girls, especially leaning into Kat. But here, Autumn is acting like I constantly bullied and ignored her. It's a little frustrating and feels out of character. I would feel that this is more in line with Nora. And that is also something I agree with. I think this sort of section of Autumn feeling insecure about the attention she gets from the other girls fits more in line with Nora. I think if Autumn was more focused on the trust factor and the fact that, hey, we stick together, why didn't we share this information with each other? That would have been a better reason for her to have this sort of crisis of faith. And Nora being upset about not getting attention would make a lot of sense. And the other thing is, with that word game, there's some options that I feel like it's just so finicky, where it's something as simple as like, because it's a word game where if you've played it, you look around the room and you go like, if you look at the bed, it's like, that smelly old bed that's older than us, or that bed with all our sleeping bags that we used for the sleepover. She will hate the option where you talk about the fun sleepovers, but then like the option where you talk about how old the bed is. But then with other stuff, it's like all the board games we never got to play, she'll get mad, but all the board games you taught me, she likes. So it's just, it feels a little finicky. Next, we go outside and we talk to Nora in the adult timeline. And she is sort of falling to her old habits. She feels the need to escape because she's panicking and she's upset. And she wants to leave. And in this moment, Nora could leave the reunion altogether. It pretty much hinges on what happens in the flashback that this conversation leads into. Real quick, in the context of my playthrough, Nora feels almost creepy the way she flirts with Swan, because she has seen my Swan say directly to Kat that she has feelings for her, yet is still trying to make these, I don't know, it's just a small thing. It's just a small thing. But for those of you who enjoy Nora as a character, I'm sure you enjoyed the flashback of being in her garage and having this, and once again, a very well done quiet moment. After the very nice conversation in the garage, they end up hatching this plan to try and break Kat out of her home in order to go watch a meteor shower. And this section is pretty much what makes or breaks Nora staying in the reunion or not. It pulls from Life is Strange, where when you get caught, it's like, oh, that's not what happened, rewind. But apparently, if you get caught enough times, this upsets Nora, and basically it leads to her leaving in the adult timeline. However, if you end up succeeding in this sort of sneaking section, you end up getting to see Kat's room, which, as someone who's a big fan of Kat's character and the relationship dynamic between her and Swan, I love this. The first thing I want to point out is there's a Peter Pan poster on her wall, and it just has such great implications for her as a character, especially with her dying of a sickness. To me, it represents how, you know, she's a kid that will never grow up. Like the Lost Boys are like Peter himself, and that she wants to, like Peter, stay in this magic place where things never change and she'll never have to fully grow up. In this scene, Kat asks us to cut her hair, as she cut off most of it when she got home from the hospital as sort of a protest. I like that she asks Swan to cut her hair for her, rather than just helping her by holding a mirror or something. Because over the course of the story, she's talked about how she feels that she's not given any sort of agency in her life. That she is basically trapped in a cage, people tell her what's best for her, what she should and should not do, and that she feels she has no freedom. And that's why in sections like when they first find Fawn's Rest and they're cleaning it up, in that section you can either do something for her or help her do them. So when you're looking for something to pry open the window, you can either boost her up to grab the tool, or you can just grab it yourself. I chose to include her on these things, to have her do what she wants and simply aid her in those things rather than doing it for her. This is a very interesting character progression because she's someone who wants to do things on her own, but now that she has Swan and friends that she loves and trusts, she's able to sort of allow them to do things for her and not feel like a burden. Then they set up this sort of, you know, the pillows in the bed to make it look like she's still there in case anyone checks on her. But last minute, Corey and Dylan hear them and burst in the room. Now you can either leave before they get in or you can stay. But the outcome is largely the same. Either way, Corey will take the camera. If you stay in the room, he'll destroy it, but it still somewhat functions. The viewfinder is just cracked. And he will tear up the bikini kill tickets right in front of you and Kat. So either way, what he does is exactly the same, and Kat isn't able to join for the meteor shower. When you're alone with Nora watching the meteor shower, this is where your first option to kiss her pops up, if you are going down that route. Otherwise, I feel like the simple kiss on the nose or a hug is a good platonic way to go with it if you don't want to romance her. And then Autumn actually ends up joining a little later, and Nora actually apologizes for being sort of distant. Then we return to the adult timeline, and if you are able to keep Nora at the reunion, she'll enter back in, and she sort of comes full circle. She realizes how necessary it is for her to stay simply for Kat. The fact that Kat put together this box, whatever's in it, that they need to see together. And I really like seeing her come full circle, and it feels very, very earned. It feels like a natural progression for this character who, as a kid, dealt with being avoidant, grew up, and is learning how to face that through facing her old trauma. This moment of clarity is really nice, and it sets up an exciting part of the story going forward. The other little symbolism is that now Nora is the one who is inside of the booth, closest to the window, rather than being closest to the exit, meaning that she's now further in and she's committed. Next, we meet at the Abyss, and this is where Kat sort of enlists all the girls together to do one final thing, one final act of justice in my section. She wants to vandalize the ranch and free the deer, and this makes perfect sense for her, as she likens having leukemia to being like these deer raised in cages only to die. That she has no freedom, and yet is condemned to die at a young age and never truly grow up. And it's a very well done scene, and the lines are just delivered perfectly. I cannot praise the actress who plays Kat enough. It's just chef's kiss to the acting. However, right before this, Autumn confronts her, basically upset that she didn't tell them that she was dying and that she was sick, and gets really upset with her. And if you tell her to sort of back off, she gets upset with you. And while that does feel in character, what doesn't is her immediately after agreeing to commit a crime with her. It just feels very, very like out of character for her to first come in and be like, this is wrong, what are you doing? And then immediately turn around and agree to go do this crime with her. And then also, it just felt like they needed to justify everyone being together and being a part of this big event to lead into why they agreed to never speak again. So afterwards, we see them all wearing different animal masks that sort of represent their personalities, and I really like that touch. To me, it really felt like the coven was coming to life, that they were these witches who were agents of nature, protecting it, fighting against man that had perverted the land and taken the animals, and it just felt very, very much like an iteration of witches that has just been taken to the modern day and what they would be after. Whereas old-timey witches might have been after hunters and poachers, these witches are after the farmers who are raising these deer just to die. It also reminds me of the masks from Yellow Jackets a little bit. My playthrough, as I said, revolved around Kat getting her independence and sort of becoming her own person. Which is why when I got the option to set things on fire, I let Kat do it instead, because it felt like it was really her journey. And once again, the voice actress does an amazing job capturing the power and the tragedy and the sadness of this character when she's setting it on fire, when they're freeing the deer themselves. It's just, truly, it's incredible. It's also another moment where the music really elevates the scene. I get chills from this music. Corey ends up hearing that they're releasing the deer and ends up chasing them. Corey begins to chase the girls through the woods on his dirt bike, yelling at them. When Autumn drops her wolf mask, he picks it up and puts it on and begins to howl and scream like a madman. I'll let my in the moment note do the talking. What is actually wrong with this guy? Finding a scary mask and chasing teenage girls around with it on, he's insane, he's abusive and insane, I hate him so much, and he has no redeeming qualities in my opinion. Unlike some other antagonists we've had in Life is Strange, I like having this guy as just a flat-out bad guy. Then, once they think they've escaped, he actually ends up finding them, but the deer come in and stop him. They sort of surround him, their eyes are glowing, and they end up trampling him and his bike. It's really a well-done moment because Gertie, the deer that Kat saved, is part of it, and I really like this moment of the sort of nature taking back what it wants and fighting against these poachers and farmers. I really like that moment. I think it's well done. Once they're back at Fawn's Rest, they set the lock with a new combination. And I love that the different symbols are chosen to represent each of the girls. And then when they begin to chant them and they begin to dance, it once again solidifies the witch themes of this game, which I love so much. The music is perfect for it, the slow motion, and then you get the option to dance either alone or with one of the girls. And if you choose the one you have the highest affinity with, you will have the option to kiss her. Of course, I went with Kat, and that's what ended up happening. And I thought this was a very earned moment, at least in my playthrough. I really liked the way that this went. And I think the sort of visions of them floating above the abyss and the way it empowers them and lifts them up. I think it's done very, very well. They end up going to bed, and later we cut to find out that Corey has the camera and is sort of filming the outside of Fawn's Rest. We then wake up hearing him banging on the door. Dylan's outside as well. And then he sets the place on fire. Cutting to him with the camera is really well done. I will say though, it ends up causing some issues at the very end, and we'll get to that. They're forced to flee the cabin, and they end up going to the abyss, where in my playthrough, Corey became sort of enraged and empowered by it as well. He ends up attacking Kat physically. He's hitting her, and you get the option to either attack him or protect her. However, it didn't really matter because the outcome was the same. Now, what do you think would happen? This whole playthrough has been focused on Kat's independence, and I've even helped her sister sort of stand up to Corey. And all these girls have together become empowered by this abyss and this magic. What do you think would happen? Would it be that Kat pushes him into the abyss? Maybe Kat drags him down into the abyss. Maybe the abyss itself lifts him up and pulls him in. Or Autumn just does it. Yeah, in my playthrough, Autumn randomly just decided to be the only one to push Corey in, which made zero sense to me, especially in my playthrough. But we will get back to that. Afterwards, they all sort of pass out and wake up the next morning. The abyss is gone, and then Kat, of all people, decides that they should forget about it and never talk about it again. They all put their hands together in a circle, and Kat vanishes, which also feels very weird. Like, vanishes like a Force ghost. I will save my opinions for the actual review part, but I didn't love this. And then finally we return to the present, where everyone has fully remembered things, and suddenly the lock on the box has sort of unrusted itself, and they say that it's because they hadn't remembered their full story. But now they are ready because they've remembered the entire thing. And then Autumn, the character who chastised Nora for wanting to leave, who went against any kind of moment to sort of breathe, wanted just answers, the one who brought the package disappears. She leaves. She leaves the reunion, and there's no chance to convince her to stay, at least in my playthrough. This made no sense to me. And I'll get to it, I promise. I know I'm saying that a lot this time around, but I will get to it. And then also, once they open the box, it is from Kat, and it comes with a lot of memories, a lot of knickknacks and things like that from the summer, sort of a greatest hits kind of compilation. One of my friends who was watching me when I played it said that the box is just the friends we made along the way, and I was like, dear God, it is. The box contains a lot of items from throughout the summer, as well as the camera, which we know fell into the abyss. However, the letter from Kat is written right before she left to go do this sort of little rampage thing. So I'm a little confused as to how this letter, that also states that Dylan is the one who would end up sending the package in 27 years, how this package somehow has items from the burnt down cabin, from the abyss, if it was written and locked before they ever went out and did all that. Either way, at the end we have a montage with Nora and Swan, since Autumn isn't here, and they walk around and reminisce, and then they go to her garage, and then they see a vision, and it's all very like sort of, oh, remember the good old times, oh, we're all reunited by Kat, except we aren't because Autumn left for some reason. Then we end with sequel bait, where Swan returns to the abyss and hears Kat's voice, and that's that. And that's where the game ends. So now let's get into my actual review part. So my opinion hasn't really changed on the dialogue or the way that the relationships work. I still don't think that this sort of waiting and more options pop-up system is really the best, because for me, it made me feel like I was constantly missing out on something. And I feel like I did in the end. Even when I replayed it, there were new options, and I don't love that. I like having my set options, or with Oxenfree, I do like that the dialogue disappears, but you get all three of your options right there. The other thing is I don't like the way that the relationships with the girls works. And what I mean by that is that the only way that they like you is if you agree with them. If you disagree with them, if you challenge them in any way, they don't like that. And to me, that's just not how friendships work. I'm friends with people who disagree with me all the time, and some of my closest friends I argue and bicker with quite often, but we love each other because we're close and we have that bond. And so when I call out adult Nora for being avoidant and she just gets more distant, that doesn't feel realistic. It feels like if she truly wants to confront that part of herself, which she does, it should either have a neutral or positive effect on her because you're bringing that to the surface. You're not letting her get away with her BS. You're not just blindly agreeing with her. And the same with Autumn. When you try to reassure her, all the way back in tape 1, she doesn't like that. When you say, oh, it'll work out, I promise, she doesn't like it at all. But then the adult Autumn recognizes that she should have. In the end, either way, your relationship with her is still hurt. And it just doesn't feel realistic. It doesn't feel like how real friends, these real childhood friends that are so close, almost bonded by blood, like these characters literally are, that something as simple as being like, I didn't like that you reassured me, so I'm then in 27 years going to leave a meeting. Or you forgot my toothbrush, so blah, 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 blah. Bottom line with that criticism is just, I don't feel it's realistic because real friends like that real friends like that are able to challenge each other and push each other to be better people. And I just think that having to basically agree with all of them, no questions asked, in order to be close to them makes no sense. Our differences, whether it's a romantic thing or a friendship thing, the differences are what makes people really click, in all honesty. The other thing I want to get into is the box. The next thing I want to get into is the ending with Corey and all the different variations of that. So real quick, just to sort of set the stage, I'm going to read out all the different versions of the confrontation at the Abyss for you. So I have a photo of it here. I'll put it up on the screen as well. Corey dragged Kat into the abyss as he fell. You and Kat pushed Corey into the abyss. You, Kat, and Autumn pushed Corey into the abyss. You, Kat, and Nora pushed Corey into the abyss. The four of you pushed Corey into the abyss. Kat and Dylan pushed Corey into the abyss. Autumn pushed Corey into the abyss. Nora pushed Corey into the abyss. The abyss pulled Corey in harmony with the girls. There's a lot of different variations, and I think I personally got shafted. I got just Autumn pushing her in, which, if I have the lowest relationship with her overall, it makes no sense. And then on top of that, for her to then leave, despite the fact that I've reconnected with her the most as an adult, that also makes zero sense. I think my issue with this section in particular is that the sheer amount of variations, it's impressive, and the fact that your choices have that much weight is impressive. However, I think it harms the game and the narrative more than it actually helps it. Most people would say more outcomes the better, more choices the better. But I think in a game that's trying to say one cohesive message, it really doesn't. I think having 2 or 3 endings, maybe one where just Kat pushes him in, one where the Abyss takes him, and then one where all 4 of the girls push him in, makes more sense narratively. So having all these different variations, while interesting, takes away from the impact, because I genuinely feel like the choices I made don't add up to Autumn being the one doing this and then also leaving because of it. That's just really where my issues lie with my playthrough in particular, and I know that's kind of a selfish thing to be like, well, I don't like it because I didn't get a good ending. But genuinely, it took me so out of the narrative because I was more confused than anything. The route I was going with Kat sort of becoming more empowered and sort of helping Corey and sort of helping Dylan out with her things, I felt like I was lined up for Kat to do it, or for the group as a whole to do it, because I had repaired my relationship with Autumn through helping her with her panic attack as well as reconnecting with her in the future. So then this ending just made no sense to me. Finally, we have to talk about the box and some of the plot holes that it brings up, and I don't think it was handled the best way. Obviously, no mystery is going to be as good or be as cool as you imagine it's going to be in your head. My issue is just with the way that they decided to explain how the box arrived to begin with, I don't think they should have done that. And what I mean is having a line in her letter where Kat says that Dylan must have mailed it because that's what she asked, makes sense. Because it makes sense that, oh, she made this package before she died and then it was sent off once she died. But then you remember, oh wait, no, Kat either falls into the abyss or disappears like Yoda, and the box is still there, and then Dylan waited 27 years after, at least in mine, Kat said to forget about everything. I think the best way for me to talk about this and why I feel there's some issues with it is just to go from my ending. So think about it this way. Kat disappears like Yoda after saying, hey guys, we need to forget because of all the issues and all this stuff. No one's ever going to believe us. We need to never speak again. Disappears. She obviously can't amend that letter or anything because she wrote it beforehand. And she was like, hey, before I go out and do these things with my friends, I want them to have a memory of me for when I die in the future, for them to look back on and sort of reminisce, right? But then the issue arises when we have items from after the event happens. But the issue arises when we consider that the box itself, the items within, were supposedly organized before they went out to burn down the ranch and to free the deer. It was before that. She said she wrote it in preparation for it, right? So then how do we have items like the lock, like the troll doll, and among other things that were supposed to be lost in the fire at Fawn's Rest in the box, also with seemingly no fire damage? One of the explanations could be that Dylan went to the site and sifted through it, but even then that doesn't make much sense. And then on top of that, we have items that went into the abyss and were still perfectly preserved from all the way back in 1995. Her battery in the camera was still going, which means that somehow the box that was sitting, waiting, and fully prepped with a letter at her house somehow had items from the abyss put into it and then was still sent out by Corey in 27 years. I hope I'm making sense, because if they had just said, Kat put this box together for us, and left it at that, I would have no issues. Because leaving that vague means that, oh, well, maybe it is something from the abyss. Maybe it's something that fell into the abyss. Maybe it is something that she set up beforehand. Oh, but how would this be in there? That adds to the mystery. But by clarifying when it was sent and by who, it takes away that mystery element and just makes it a plot hole. They shouldn't have said that simple piece of text saying that Dylan sent it. Really sort of creates an issue with the ending. And then also, Kat herself just disappearing also felt unsatisfying. I feel like the journey for her, with her maybe even giving herself over to the abyss rather than just falling in or whatever, makes more sense. And then someone like Autumn suggesting that, hey, we should never talk about this again, makes the most sense out of everything. That to me makes the most sense. But for Kat, the one who was shown to love everyone so much, to love this summer, to want to keep everything going, to then be like, hey, actually, we shouldn't talk about this forever, is really weird. And then also why, if we're going the route that she says that Dylan sent it, why did Dylan wait 27 years? Why didn't Dylan just say, I don't know, my sister told me to give you this box? If it is from the abyss, the only way the box really makes sense is if somehow the box went into the abyss or came from the abyss. That's where it makes the most sense, because then you can explain why everything was preserved, how feasibly they would have these magic items, things like that. You can explain that away. But once again, by grounding it in reality, by saying, oh yeah, no, here it is, the night before, it was sealed then, and then Dylan sent it, just sort of takes away some of the mystery and adds more questions than answers. Which is, once again, why I think the variation in choices really hurts this game more than anything. I found myself almost anxious about trying to get a better ending when I went through my second playthrough, only to feel really disappointed when my attempts to really fix my relationship with Autumn, my attempts to empower Dylan more, led to zero changes in the outcome. Autumn still pushes Corey no matter what in my playthrough, and I really don't understand why. And so what I have to say about this game is that, ironically, the sheer amount of detail in the choices and the weight of all your choices is a bad thing. It harms the narrative. Because if it was a little more limited in its ending, which I feel it should be, it would be a much more satisfying and well-written game. And I feel like if you got the proper ending, it's a very well-done, cohesive story. But I have to look at this from the experience of a user who's on his first time playing through this. And not everyone's going to get that perfect ending that you got, or the ending where both of the adults leave and it's Swan alone, which I also feel is a narratively satisfying ending. But not everybody gets that. And it leaves a good chunk of people feeling disappointed with the game and its ending. Because the experience is awesome. The ending fumbles for me. I hope I'm making sense and I don't sound like I'm just whining because I didn't get a good ending. I did really love the game and the experience. I love Tape 1 because of how slow it moved, and I love Tape 2 because you get these one-on-one conversations with everybody and it works so well. I just really think that the culmination of everything needs some fine-tuning, whether it's that some of the endings should have been cut and there should only be like 3 or 4 alternate endings, or if the weight of certain choices needs to be rebalanced. Whatever it is, I feel like something has to be different to make the ending more cohesive for everybody, and to sort of pick from the 3 different Swans alone, no one else is there, it was too painful to go through, everyone sticks together ending, or something else. I feel like it really should have been somewhere between those different options, where instead of all the little tiny little differences and like this person pushes him, no this person does, no this happens, where the abyss takes him. I feel like it just sort of takes the oomph out of the good endings because so many people are going to get these sort of mediocre ones. I also think something the game was lacking was any sort of showing that, hey, this choice is really important. In Life is Strange and other games, such as Telltale, the game will pause and go into slow motion, maybe even split the screen to be like, hey, you can either do this or you can do this, and this will have long-reaching effects over the story. Versus smaller choices, like in your dialogue, that you don't really think would have an impact, but end up having it. This game sort of lacks that. The only time something like that happens is choosing to either protect Kat or attack Corey in the ending. But as I stated, at least in my playthrough, that didn't do anything. It didn't change anything about who ended up pushing him. So it feels like it wants to do both. It wants to have more of an on-rails story, but also have all these different outcomes. And the two ideas clash so much in this ending that it really just harms the story overall. And the other thing is, with the sequel bait at the end, I like that idea, especially for someone who ended with the soulmates reputation with Kat. I love that. I love that sort of tragic romance that she met the one girl who truly got her and then she was taken away from her. But now as an adult, even hearing her voice again, she's drawn to this place, this ambiguous, possibly evil source of power to try and find her again. I love that idea for a sequel. However, the sequel only works, in my opinion, if you select from one of those 3 endings. I can't see a sequel coming out and they're like, okay, who pushed this person for you? And you have to like check boxes of like, okay, these 2 things happened, but only this thing happened. It's sort of easier in my mind to have a cohesive narrative if you're able to choose between like, oh, everybody pushed him and I was romantic with this person, versus, oh, I was alone at the end and this happened. So I want a sequel, but I can't see how all of these different little offshoots to the endings would ever be accounted for, when the only options, the only really interesting routes to go for this ending would be an A or B type option. So then it once again makes these other little endings less impactful and less narratively satisfying. So all of that to say, the build-up to the ending, if we ignore the last chapter, I think it's an amazing game. I think it's almost a 10 out of 10. But the ending and the sheer amount of choices that sort of take away from the overall theme and the overall narrative of the story brings it down for me. Something like Life is Strange, while it does have a very binary, here's what happens at the end, you either do this or this, both endings serve the theme of the story that it's trying to accomplish. It serves the story. All these little variations in the ending, to me, in this game, don't serve the story or the overarching narrative. So for that reason, I'm going to give this game a very solid 7.5 out of 10. It's really great. When it works and you get that sort of true ending, it's an amazing game. However, simply judging it in terms of how the gameplay itself works, the branching paths, it brings it down for me because not everything feels cohesive to the story. But let me know what you think. I'm sure a lot of you will disagree, and I'd love to hear your stories and the endings that you got in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and have a good morning or evening or, whatever. See you in hell. You're fitting well.